This episode is brought to you by Lindus Group of Companies. Why go anyplace else? And Devil's Isle Racing.
They put their heart and soul into the game with a vision of winning for themselves and their country. They put in countless hours perfecting their skills while making so that they will taste victory. These are our athletes, and now it's time to meet them up close.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Up Close with yours truly, Colin Thompson. Well, today it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you another one of our former greats, powerboat extraordinaire, powerboat racing extraordinaire, Mr. Chris Marshall. Mr. Marshall, welcome to the show. And
thank you, Colin.
And it's a pleasure to have you on board today.
Thank you.
Well, it's interesting because most of the guests we have here, it's sort of a throwback, former greats, and, we're profiling their careers and whatnot. You are an exception to that rule in that you've just come out of retirement at the tender age of
68. Yep.
What on earth prompted that?
Well, I really had no intention of coming back, but my grandsons were getting older, and I always took them down to Ferry Beach for around the island race. And last year, he's 19 years old now. My grandson, after watching the race and going around, I still know a lot of the guys down there, and he just looked at me at the end and he said, "Papa, I want to race boats." And I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Listen, it's not my choice. It's really your choice. And we're going to have to ask permission of your mother because I know for sure that your grandma, Dee Dee, is going to say no if we ask her. So we can't ask her. So we got to ask your mom." And we went and asked his mom. And, she said, "Sure, if he really wants to do it." And I said, your mom's not going to like that. And she said, "Well, he's my son, so I get to decide." So we got permission, and I told him I'd try and, hook up a boat for him and get started. So that's really what I did over the winter, was to try to identify a good boat for him to start in, what I considered to be a good boat for him to start in. And that's what we've done. And, so I want to make sure that he gets the opportunity at a younger age that, quite honestly, I never did. I started quite late. And I also want to try and see if we can continue to get younger Bermudians involved at an earlier stage so that they can carry on in the Powerboat Association. Right now, the Powerboat Association does have a junior program that Cleveland Mayberry and the committee are doing, I think, a fantastic job at. And that's really going to be the feeder for the Powerboat Association, is those younger racers. They get in excess of the age 16 and they can start getting into the bigger boats and racing. So I hope that continues. The thing that's really a barrier, in my opinion, right now with that happening, the transitioning from junior racing to the bigger boats, is the cost. The cost is really, it's hard for a younger person to get involved unless they really have support from either their family or from another racer, might be an older brother or an uncle, something like that, to get them started in it. So that was the two things that really drove me to get back into it. Number one was my grandson. I wanted to make sure he had the opportunity. And number two was to try to attract more younger people. And, I've been thinking about this, like how do you make that transition from the junior program where the association is providing the boats and the equipment for the young guys? And how do you transition from that to having to have your own boat or a friend's boat or something to race in? And I was just trying to figure out, how do you do that transition? And I think the way to do that transition is as the younger people move up through the junior program, or people who just want to get involved in powerboat racing, number one is become a member of the association. That's got to be the first step. And it's very reasonable. It's $375 a year. And that's not bad at all. So once you're a member of the association, I can almost guarantee you that you go down there and you're going to find a racing team that would love to have some help in the pits. And that's the way to get started. You could be 17, 18, you could be 35 if you want. but go down there and say, hey, you guys need some help? You mind if I help you? And you'll get in there, and then you'll find as you get established in the pit crew and everything, invariably somebody needs a co-pilot during the racing season. And if you're up there every week and you're helping and all the time, guess who they're going to choose? And you're going to get into a boat. And that's the first step. So even if you have no money, if you have $375 for the year, just get involved, show up, help. You'll have a blast because they're great people down there. All the teams are great from what I've seen this year. In the past, sometimes there was a lot of controversy down there, but I haven't seen any of that this year. So yeah, those guys can just get involved and stick with it. They'll get a ride eventually. And as they get a ride and as they maybe get older or something and they've got a little bit more money, disposable income, they'll be able to get a boat or they'll be able to go in with another friend and get a boat. But it's getting them in there. It's getting them in there. And I really think the feeder program is not only the junior program, but it's the pit crews. Get in there. People will accept you with arms open. If you say, you guys need some help on Sundays, you mind if I come down and help you? No one's going to say no to that. They're just not.
And your grandson, what's your grandson name?
Jakari Marshall. Yeah.
And his age?
He's 19.
He's 19.
Yeah.
And you said you started later in your career.
I
What
started.
age did you start?
I didn't race, I think, until I was 30 years old.
Wow.
And
A late bloomer.
well, it wasn't my doing, to be honest. What happened was that actually, if I had had a choice of sports, it probably would have been motocross to start with. When I was about 17 years old, I bought a motocross bike. I saved up all my money, bought it, signed up with the Motocross Association to race down to Coney Island in those years. Yeah, it was like, what would that be, like 1974 or 75. And I got the bike, I arranged everything. I paid my dues and everything. They were supposed to call me before the race on Sunday and give me my competition number. So I won't say who the secretary was of the Motocross Association at that point, but he called up and my mother answered. And he said, is Chris there? She said, no. And she said, can I help you? And he said, sure. Can you tell Chris that his competition number is, I can't remember what it was, 18 or whatever, for this Sunday? And she said, competition? And he said, yeah, for Coney Island motocross racing. And she said, oh, really? And he said, yeah, can you just pass that on? Well, I came home that night and my motocross bike was locked in the basement. She said there was no way she was going to let me go down there and race at Coney Island. So that sort of put an end to that part. And then, so I started thinking, okay, well, what else can I do that maybe they'll let me do? So I decided powerboat racing sounded like fun. So I sold the motocross bike and I bought just a hull of an old race boat, old Bristol. Needed a lot of fiberglass work. And but I bought it, I put it in the backyard. Everybody seemed happy. I was working down there on the boat, and I was fiberglassing all the repairs it needed. And I'm not a good fiberglasser. It was not. I'm still not a good fiberglasser. It was not pretty, but at least I was having fun doing it. And I did it all, and I was ready to go, just a haul. So I approached my parents, asked them if I could borrow some money to buy a motor. You can probably guess what they said. Thanks to my mom. My mom is very risk averse. My mom and dad said, nope, not lending you any money for a motor. So I couldn't race. And I was about, I don't know, I was about 17 at that point in time. And so I really, I wanted to do it, but I didn't have the means. I didn't have the funds. And that's one of the things I'm worried about the junior program. As they move out of the junior program, they're going to come up against similar issues that I came up with. Then I went away to university, came back from university, got married, bought myself another Bristol race boat. But when you're first married, you don't have a lot of money. I couldn't afford to buy a motor at that point in time, so I sold that boat. It was a number of years until about 85 or 86 where I switched jobs and I got a little bit more pay every month. And I decided, okay, well, maybe now's the time. And so that's why it took me till I was 30, 1986. You know, I started when I was 17 or 18 wanting to race boats.
Wow.
I should have gone down to Ferry Reach and been in a pit crew, but I had family, I had jobs, you know, it was kind of tough. Anyway, 1986, I bought myself a boat. We did some work on it, and I started racing down at Ferry Reach in '86. But I don't want I don't want my grandson, and I don't want other youngsters, men or female,
Mhm.
to have to go through that. You know, we've got a feeder program we're working on. If we can get more support from parents, families, and quite honestly, just society in general, sponsors, government, whatever, just to let them feed into there. It's a great sport. It's like a club. I can't explain it any other way. Everybody is so friendly. You know, they have get-togethers. It's like a big club, and I just hope that we can start moving it in the right direction, just to attract a lot more people.
So 86, you had your second Bristol.
Well,
Uh,
I actually had sold it. Yeah, I had sold the Bristol,
mhm,
and I bought what was called a Cormorant. Um,
okay.
it was it was a boat that had been raced by Carl Soers in previous years. So yeah, it was a Cormorant in '86.
Okay. And what size engine did you
I was in A
do?
class, same
A
thing I'm
class.
starting my grandson in. Yeah, it was at that point in time, it was what was it? It was a 70 Evinrude that we were racing in that class. They'd gone up to 115 horsepowers now, but we were restricted to 70s.
And how did you cope your debut season? Uh,
We did very well. I was fortunate in that the boat was a heavy boat, so it handled the rough water really well, and we had a lot of rough races that year, so it was really good. Um,
So it was just you in the boat, or
no, it was me, and I had different people do. My brother did it once in one race for me. Um, Most of the races was Glenn Smith, who was my co-pilot, and you know, it was I don't know, it was a lot of fun, and yeah, we did very well in our first year.
it was pretty popular back then as well. The sport, well attended, big crowds, and what was it like for you finally getting out there? Was it a bit intimidating seeing all these people watching you? And
It was, you know what? It's funny when you're down there and you're focusing on getting your boat ready and you're focusing on putting the boat over and that you don't really recognize everything that's going on around you at that point in time. You're very focused on the races coming up. You got to make sure you choose the right propeller. Choosing a propeller is very important based on what the conditions are on that day. So you're looking at getting your propeller, making sure you have enough fuel to finish the race, you got all your equipment. All this other stuff can be going on, but if you're really focused, you don't really notice that. But before I started racing, I was going down there on Sundays watching. And at those points in time, I mean, you had food trucks down there, you had cars parked everywhere. I mean, it was really packed, especially around the island. It was just packed with people down there. Um, and I firmly believe we're going to get there again. I think we have a great committee now. They're really so impressed with all of them, quite honestly, and how much energy they're bringing to the sport right now. So I think we're going to get there. We just got to make sure that once again, it's people. You got to pull those people in. You got to build for the future, and that's happening now.
now you mentioned about around the island. I'm going to get to that. It's actually something else just came to mind. Can you recall your first win? You know, as a powerboat racer at Down at Ferry Reef.
Well, this probably helped a lot because my first win was my first race,
Wow, that's an easy one.
and it was rough as anything. Like I said, I had a heavier boat. We had done a few things back in those days. Everybody wanted to, as they call it, split the bullet, so that the bottom of their hull, the bullet of the lower unit of the engine was like just right on there, and that's what everybody was doing. But a lot of times in the rough, that doesn't always work. You want to have your engine down a little lower than the bottom of your boat. So when I bought the boat, the boat was set up with the lower unit right on the bottom of the boat. And we had to go, and I had a friend, Robert McGlynn. Then I went down, he had a marine shop down in Riddles Bay, and we took a saw and we cut out a big part of the transom of that boat so that we could drop the engine and we dropped it about 3 inches, which made a huge difference. So we went out there on the first race and we beat A class and we beat B class. But it was only because the boat was set up right, and it was a heavier boat and it was rough. So, but once you get, the excitement of just racing that first race, the excitement of winning that first race, you don't look back. You just want more, quite honestly.
You hit the ground running and
Hit the ground running.
wow,
And loved it.
everyone, it was a jaw drop. Everyone was like, "Who's this?"
The question was, actually, somebody did come up to me and say, "How'd you beat B class?" Because B class, I can't remember the size engine they had at that point, but it was much bigger than the 70 Evinrudes. And they said, "Yeah, how did you do that?" And I said, "Boat just handled great in the rough."
Wow. And who's some of the competitors you raced against? During that era.
Oh, that was a long time ago, man. Greg Corbett was out there. Um, Greg Corbett, Mark Furtz was out there. Like if I go through all the classes and everything, some of them, Craig Nesbitt,
Mm-hmm.
the father, was out there, and he's still out there. He's still racing with his son, which I think is fantastic. So they're still racing after all those years. I mean, there was a lot of them down there now trying. I mean, not in my class, but another class. In those years, you had Derek Simons. You had a fellow by name, I don't know his real name. His name was Stools. We used to call him Stools all the time down there. Gregory Simmons, who was Derek's brother, I believe, he was racing down there. One of the people who really got me to go out there, Lee White, was out there at the time. You had Craig Selling. You had a lot of these names that, people will
Right, so a lot of
remember
us
around
with the
that.
sport. You mentioned
Yeah.
some of those names, and instantly powerboat racing comes to mind.
It was, you can use the word magical. It was a magical period, and the competition was fierce. We had actually one of my main competitors who I forgot to mention was the Emery brothers. So, or Every brothers. It was Mark, and he had 2 brothers as well, and they were down there. And it was like when we were out there racing, every race, actually, it was close. They won some, I won some. We had it was in the second year of racing, but we had identical boats that we had brought in from England, identical engines. So it all came down to who was braver on that particular day. And but us guys had a lot of fun. A lot of fun doing that. And most of the classes were extremely competitive. And I'm seeing some of that, especially this year coming up now. There are a lot of classes that have a number of boats in it and competitive boats with each other. And there's no better feeling than when you're out there and it's a close race.
Yeah, evenly matched.
Yeah.
Now, you alluded to Ronnie Island, the big one, the crown jewel, as
Yeah.
some may say. Did you ever win that prestigious race?
Well, we did. I mean, there is an overall winner in
Right,
that race every year, which
First cross the line, and
to cross the
it's
line, but
prestigious. But then you have the races.
yeah, but
in
the first
every category, right?
Yeah, but the first to cross the line is I was always a little bit hesitant about that one because it was. I'll tell you some stories about that, but it all depends on how much gap the committee decides goes between the classes. So if they put, like, if you have A class go off and then B class goes off a minute later, B class is going to beat A class. So there's a little bit of art in doing that and how you do that. So I never really, first across the line is, once again, prestigious. I can't disagree with that. But it all depends on what gaps you leave as they leave Ferry Reach and what the conditions are out there. So, but for A class, we did win A class. We raced 5 years between 86 and 91, and we won A class 3 times. One time our engine broke down, and one time, what happened our transom broke, but we continued on. We came in second that year, but
Just split, just cracked.
it actually cracked from the front. The engine was bouncing around so much on South Shore that the weight of the engine actually broke the boat apart in the transom. So all of a sudden, when you're going along, and it's really hard because the engine is going like moving like that. So, but anyway, we finished that race. The closest we came is we came second across the line. I can't remember what year that was, but Lee White and Herbie Adderley passed us just outside of the oil
Oh,
dock
you
in
know.
St. John.
Wow, almost home and dry.
Almost, but yeah, but it was, yeah, you can't, the around the island is just so much fun. You're so sore usually because it's usually rough down South Shore, especially. You're sore
I see
from
your
3 or
class. I mean,
4
you're the smallest class, the A class.
You do, and people don't realize that. We're not going as fast as anybody else, but we take more of a beating than anybody. I mean, your body is just aching for days.
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering at 68, you're still at
I I
it.
will admit that we raced on Sunday, and it was a great race, great course in Hamilton Harbor. Man, was I sore yesterday. I'm okay today, but I got bruises and
You got an unlimited supply of ibuprofen.
oh no, I wish I had had that back in the 80s. I sort of had this thing in the 1980s that I didn't think I should be taking anything, any drugs, and if I ached, that's because my body needed to rejuvenate or whatever. So I would never take anything like aspirin or ibuprofen or anything like that. And I was so wrong. I got to tell you, Advil is magic stuff, man. It takes away all the swelling and everything, and all the inflammation, helps you heal quicker. I never realized that.
That's right.
It helped, man. I took I took a couple before I went on Sunday, and I took a couple after, and it helped.
All right. Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, it's magic stuff.
So you had a fine, a fabulous career here, a very successful career here. Where did this idea of taking your career overseas and competing professionally or stepping up big
Uh-oh.
time?
I always wanted to, I mean, I always wanted to do it. It was once again, it was in 1991, my business responsibilities increased significantly. So I really had to decide, you always want to progress. You want to take on different challenges and everything. I decided at that point in time I had to focus on my job. So I sold my boat and everything in 91 here on the island. And 1 year later, I bought another boat. I bought Andy Stoneham's. It was called a Thoroughbred here on the island to race. But once again, the job, the family, I had like 2 children at that point in time. The job and the family took over. It was a bigger boat. I didn't have a way to get it down to Ferry Beach to tow it. And I ended up selling it after a year without having to even race it. So the 90s were really spent for me focusing on my family and focusing on my job. And that was full time, both of them, it really was. And my job also took me off the island a lot. I had to do a lot of traveling for my job. Um, so towards the end of the 90s, though, I felt I needed some outlet. I needed an outlet, something to go back and, I always return in my mind anyway to boat racing. And so when was it? I guess it was late 1998. I decided to buy a boat in the United States and bring it back to Bermuda. And at that point in time, um, the 28-foot skaters were just, they were doing really well in the circuit in the United States. Um, and they were just great boats. So I bought myself a 28-foot skater that had actually been raced by Craig Nesbitt, the father, in the United States. So I bought that boat, and then my trouble was, okay, now you're racing in the United States, you need an infrastructure. You got a boat, you live in Bermuda, how are you going to organize this? So I made a few cold calls from people who had raced in past years in the United States. I knew their names. I didn't know any of them personally. And I started talking to a fellow by the name of Dennis Berry. And Dennis had just stopped racing. And I said, listen, I only want to race a year or so, but the boat's in the United States, then I'll bring it back to Bermuda. So Dennis and I start talking, and we became good friends over the telephone. Then I went out to his place. He picked up the boat for me, brought it down to his place in Illinois. And I went out there and visited, and we started talking. And he said, hey, Chris, this boat here, it's a good boat, but I've got a better boat. The boat I used to race is a 30-foot Spectre, and it's a better boat for the conditions they race in now. So we sold the 28-foot skater. I bought the 30-foot from Dennis, and that's how we started. And then we raced We raced in, let's see, 99, 2000, 2001. We had a real disappointing last race in 2001. We decided to retire, so we retired in 2002 and 2003. We didn't race anymore in those 2 years. Sold all the equipment, all the props, everything. It was kind of crazy, but I'll explain to you what was the disappointing last race in 2001. But anyway, Dennis calls me up in late 2003 and says, "Hey, Chris, you want to do it again?" And I said, "No, Dennis, we are retired. My job is taking a lot of time. My family's taking a lot of time. We are retired." I couldn't sleep that night at all. Just, I'd been out of it for 2 years. Now I'd been watching all the guys I used to race with out there on the course still. And first thing in the morning, I called Dennis up. I said, "Let's do it, Dennis." And we got back into it again, full steam ahead again after 2 years off. And we did very well. We raced up till the end of 2007.
So you had to get another boat.
We had to buy another boat, but
What did you get this time?
let's see, when we started that time, well, the interesting thing about that period of time in powerboat racing, and even in the 1990s and the 2000s, was that the technology was increasing so quickly. So even the first 3 years we raced, 99, 2000, 2001, we had two boats. We ran the Spectre the first year, and then we went to Jay Polini at Spectre Powerboats and asked him to build us a race boat because we were into it then, right? We wanted to get the best we could. And he built us a great race boat with it had F-16 fighter jets canopies on it, and they were separated though. Now that everybody's together, but we were separated. But you had to keep improving your equipment because everything was moving so quick. Through the 1990s, the 28-foot skater was the dominant force, really. And then towards the end of the 1990s, Spectres started coming out. And they were also great catamarans. So anyways, like I said, we sold both those boats. Then when we came back in, we actually bought another boat that was built by Doug Wright. It was Doug Wright's, actually, I believe it was Doug Wright's first boat. It was a 30-foot catamaran. Somebody else bought the molds from him after that, and they became the AMTs. But the first one he built was built for a fellow by the name of Gary Ballou, who's won like 15 world championships. And Gary raced it for one season, and it was available for next season. So we bought that boat from Gary. And we raced that. We raced that for 2 years maybe. And then we went to Doug Wright, and Doug built us another boat that we raced the last season of our races. So, but you had to keep improving, and it's still very much like that over there. The association in the United States, they have a rule book, obviously, as to what you can and can't do. But every time they try to restrict it, not everything's written down. So people continue to do technological advances, and the boats get quicker and quicker and quicker. And you either have to, hope that the rules restrain it so much so that your boats are still competitive, or you got to move up. And we found through the late 1990s and early 2000s, you had to keep moving up because every year something else was coming onto the market that was far superior than any of our boats. I mean, just same courses, okay, that were being run in the United States, same race courses, but you found that in the early 1990s, 24-foot skaters were very dominant. Then towards the end of the 1990s, 28-foot. They tend to start to get longer because the longer boats can handle the rough water better. And then the Spectres came in the 30s. And then Doug Wright's first boat, what's now referred to as AMTs really, came in. That was a 30-foot boat. And then just after the 30-foot boat came in and everything, 32-foot Doug Wrights came out. And the 32-foots are dominant as anything. Bigger boats, heavier boats, but because they go through that rough so nicely compared to the shorter boats, they became dominant. So, and now you've got the 32 Doug Wrights are still dominant, and that's 20 years later, right? Still dominant, but now you've got them coming out of Saudi Arabia. You've got the Victory boats and everything, 32 foot still, but they're still coming out. So bottoms are being changed. Technology is continuing to go forward. And
Ongoing evolution.
ongoing evolution. And if you want to do any length of time racing, you've got to look at what other people are doing, and you've got to either step up or, just enjoy the racing because, you want to.
So what was the competition that you competed in,
Well,
the association?
yeah, the association, that's changed over the last 20 years as well, a lot. The association we started with was SBI, Superboat International, and that was dominant for a number of years in the States. So that's where we started. We raced with them for a number of years. After that, a competing association started which was Offshore Super Series. And then that became dominant for probably a 5-year period. And so you had sometimes the two associations holding different races. And so that's also continued to evolve. And now they have, I believe it's Race World Offshore, they call it, which everything I see, and that's where, that's where all the S-class boats are racing right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and they seem to be extremely organized. They're getting great turnouts, a number of boats and everything. So that's continued to change. So we race with APBA, which is still in APBA, SBI, OSS, and but yeah, that continues to evolve in the States as well.
Okay. Folks, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more from former professional powerboat racer, Mr. Chris Marshall.
This episode is brought to you by Lindus Group of Companies. Why go anyplace else? And Devil's Isle Racing.